Okay, guys, we are live and recording. I wanted to just kind of introduce the topic. I'm not going to run this as a podcast thing. Instead, I'm just going to run this as a recording, and we're going to float it out there. In each of the kinds of recordings we do, we tend to focus on whether we're either doing something about delivery or something about knowledge acquisition, or as we are in this case, something actually about giving feedback on delivery. So I'm going to spend a few minutes with Tom and Ben, and we'll talk a little bit about, after delivery goes, how to do that, and maybe some good tips and tricks. I'm going to let Tom and Ben quickly introduce themselves as well.
Hi, I'm Tom Sidebottom. I'm a principal technical trainer here at ServiceNow. That's Tom.
Okay, perfect.
Hey everyone, I'm Ben Forrest, also principal technical trainer, and that's me.
All right. Both of these guys have a ton of experience on the presentation format. What we've been doing is building out and delivering kind of just practice ramp up. Some of you probably have already done something like this if you've ever done Toastmasters or any of those other areas. But what we've been kind of developing almost kind of organically in presentations is a form that we've been using to let people give good feedback. And so that's what I'm going to share with you guys now. And I'm going to flip it over to these guys in just a minute for their thoughts on it. But what I want to do first is take a moment and share out my screen as soon as I can get to that piece. There we go. And okay, there we go. So what I've got right now is just a straight out Google Sheet. And this is the sheet and format that we've been using. And what I did was I put out notes on it. Typically what we've been doing for presentation, and I think this works for PS as well as anything else, really. You know, for training delivery or PS delivery or workshop delivery, that element of if you can dry run and practice it, if you can do it on a video and have other people give feedback, then that's a good thing. And I think it only helps to improve presentations. So we set out this Google Sheet. Typically what I do with a Google Sheet when someone's coming out to present is I make a quick copy of it. And so that's easy enough to do. I'll copy it to the existing spreadsheet. You can see we've even got a bit of a convention here, the date and the person that's going to present. Then we put in the presentation, a start time and a stop time. Now, what I've done out here on the sheet is we put out a column for feedback, both things that are positive and things that could use improvement. Now, the other piece that I'd like to kind of share with people that we've been doing in our feedback sessions is to get the person who is presented to give their own feedback first, a self-evaluation of sorts. The reason that I think that's important from my perspective when going to offer feedback is oftentimes people who present, you don't have a great sense of what you sound like or what you look like or what you're, so getting that aligned, it really helps. And so asking that person to give their feedback first before anyone else starts giving feedback helps them understand how aligned they are with the perception that other people are coming in. Oftentimes we'll give feedback and the most common answer in any kind of presentation, how did you do? Oh, it was horrible. And then after everybody's like, no, it really wasn't as bad as you seem to think it was. With that in mind, I always make sure when someone goes to self-eval, I insist that they tell me two things that they did well. If they can tell me two things they did well, I may coach them on those two things and say, hey, what about, or did you, if they're really, really stuck. But I want them to talk to something they did well first. And then I want them to talk about one thing that they can work to improve on. Once they've done that, and typically I prefer if they're doing that to be taking notes. If I'm taking notes while they're talking, it helps give them freedom to talk. If I'm talking while they're talking, then they tend to shut up and let me give the feedback. So I really want to kind of play it out so that I'm taking the notes while they do that. I might encourage them or facilitate them to discuss, but I'll just write notes from what they say. Then we'll turn into me giving feedback. And usually what I do is I give them one positive and one negative.
That's a sneaky way of forcing them to be a little bit self-reflective, sir.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And sharing that, I'm going to stop my share because I think this is pretty self-explanatory. I'll include the link in the video, so if you guys want to see a sample of it. Out here, just as another note, I have a sample of what's the IBSTIPI, and I can't remember what it stands for, but the Certified Technical Trainer qualifications. These are their performance metrics that they use. I'll clean this up if I ever get a chance, but in the meantime, for now, it's just a sample for you guys to look at. I'm going to stop sharing. And then, yeah, what else do you guys do? Self-reflection is kind of the best. To me, it's the way that they're going to get better. Well, what do you guys do?
For sure. When I'm doing well, so I like to start with the positive things as well, right? And I appreciate that you do you have to say two nice things about yourself before looking at some of the negative components. I like that just kind of sets the table in a way that the playing field is a little bit more even, I think. Otherwise you can, and I'm sure you've been in these situations where somebody self-reflects for a moment and it's really uncomfortable and they immediately go to all of the horrible little nitpicky things that they did that maybe somebody else did not pick up on immediately, but once they said so, they were like, oh yeah, you did, right? And then it's like a pile, let's just all pile on.
Right, right.
The other thing I really sort of force myself to do is that if I am going to provide negative feedback, I'd better show how to improve. I need to give you a resource on what to read up on to help you out. And I need to be able to demonstrate perhaps another way to try it or to do it as a matter of course. I think both of those things are really important. I have to not only show you, I also have to give you a resource for further reading. And those are kind of two of my key elements when I'm trying to provide feedback, especially if it's an area where they could improve. I need to give you something.
Yeah, like just to go, hey, you're doing this wrong, unless there's an action that can improve. That makes sense.
Yeah, otherwise I feel like it's completely not helpful.
Yeah, because then you walk away going, well, I'm not ever doing that again. And that's not really what we want. Tom, what about you, sir?
Like Ben, I always like to start with the positives. And part of the reason for that is I want the person to understand that I had a good time listening to them, that they did some things really well. And then just like Ben was saying, when I have something negative to give feedback to, I like to give suggestions for here's how you could do it differently, or even possibly do a self-evaluation when I was new to training. I found myself doing that as well. And here's how I overcame that. Mm-hmm. There are times, however, where it's just a train wreck and you have to give somebody negative feedback. And so, in my opinion, that's the difficult thing to do. I think a lot of people understand the bad news sandwich, where you put two good things in between put one bad thing in between two good things. Have you ever had the place where you could not make a bad news sandwich because it was just a total train wreck? And so, like Ben was saying, if you have to do that, give the person a resource, give them an opportunity to follow up with you after they've kind of digested what you're telling them. And then even circle back with them later and say, if you want to if you want to revisit on this, I'm happy to do that with you. And let them know that you're in their corner. You're there to help them. And I really think that is our objective. We're here to help everybody. We're not here just to be critics. So right. We're on your side.
That makes sense. And that actually leads me to another question on that same front. For you guys, how do you handle that, that element where you can tell they're overwhelmed? Like those ones that you know that they need to do, but you're not sure they're going to take it all in. Like, do you prioritize? Do you tell them anyway on the benefit that they might hear it later? Or do you go, I don't know?
So I can think of a couple of specific examples I've seen in the last couple of years where somebody went to give their demo or their sample teach, and you could tell that there is potential in this person, right? You know that they're smart. You know that they are personable. I think, however, sometimes the sort of Dunnings-Kruger about instruction is that what we do is easy, right? And when I have seen those sort of train wrecks, as Tom so eloquently described, because that's what they are, is usually because they've misapplied or they've severely underestimated or overestimated their own ability in one or two different areas. However, the bad news sandwich in that sort of context gets to be, okay, well, clearly you had some confidence, you had some abilities that you were bringing here to the table, but I think there's a fundamental mismatch in terms of where your sort of level is, and we need to step back, and we might need to completely change the frame, right? So you went to deliver this bit of information in this current frame with the understanding that this was going to be the outcome. However, I think that we actually need to step back from that and go even more fundamental And usually it comes down to one of three things. It is their own ability to adequately assess their technical skill, right? And it might be also their own ability to interact with or empathize with a room. And then lastly, and this is the one I see the most with experienced instructors who have kind of just made their way through and then are transitioning to virtual, they've overestimated their ability to overcome the virtual space. So focusing on having the presentation or the skill set, like let's go do a fundamental reworking of your ability to do one of these three things, or it might be all three and we have to do it in stages. You are muted, sir, by the way.
Oops. I had family coming in the door, so I was trying to manage to disappear away, shut the drapes, and still get sound. Speaking of feedback of things that I might not be doing quite right? In the case of there's almost too much to say, then if I'm hearing you right, you're saying you would kind of pick and choose and go, let's focus on these things, and then bring the other ones back in. Okay. Yep. And Tom, the idea of a bad news sandwich is really funny because I never think about it that way, but it's such a perfect analogy. But the nothing good to say, it sounds like a great angle. So at that point, steer them towards a resource and a next meeting, because even if I can't say anything good, I can go, why don't you work on these things and we'll come back at this time. What's so interesting about this to me is I think that's the kind of thing that and this is why having you guys in this conversation is great. Those are the kinds of things that are almost pieces that we do from experience that we don't realize that we're doing until we're all talking to each other. Because you say that, I'm like, yeah, I've been there. I've done that whole kind of bring things in and bring them around. Oh, speaking of people in the background, that's totally okay, but it's kind of funny because it's just what I was dealing with a moment ago. Okay, so guys, anything else that we can offer for managers, other principals, other PS people evaluating someone's presentations? We have a Google Sheet that you can use. We have the recommendation that potentially to ask them to self-evaluate first. We have the idea of the good news sandwich or the bad news sandwich, where we have good news on either side of it. And we have those in the cases where there's nothing else that we can do. If everything's bad, then consider steering them towards a resource. And here's the next thing. So instead of that picture of everything's horrible, here's what I need you to work on now. We'll talk more after you've done that and have another opportunity. So it's not negative, but it's also not, it's not like oh, this is horrible. It's you have opportunities to work. What else am I missing? Did I get it all?
I like it, Sean.
Okay. Well, then we're going to stop the recording. I'm going to see what we get out of it, and then I'm going to post this up. I'm going to share this on a bunch of forums. I'm probably going to share it on the one that I share with the partners. I put together kind of a Google site. I swear I'm not a Google fanatic. I just am trying to share things with the partners, and sometimes getting them into an internal instance is not always the answer. So this has been Sean McLean with Ben Forrest and Tom Sidebottom, talking about training delivery and training feedback. Thanks, guys.